$30 activation fee. Restrictions apply.
Welcome to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Today is Thursday, November 30th, 2017. Blasting off with some UFO reports. The UFO sighting in Maricopa, Arizona on November 25th, 2017. The witness states it was a bright light moving in an atypical way, and goes on to say, sitting inside our house watching TV around 9:15 p.m., my dog went berserk. Not an alert bark. I've heard those before. So I got up and went to check with the camping lantern. I stepped out onto the porch and noticed a very bright light. We see a lot of planes and flares over the bombing range, so I'm used to seeing various lights in the sky. I first thought it might have been the front lights on a plane or searchlights for a border patrol. However, this light was larger than average and very bright white. It pulsated, once making it a bit larger and shift into a more blue-white color. It then shot upward, arcing slightly northward as it did so. It disappeared within seconds, giving me just enough time to realize how abnormal it was. Within minutes, the sky had a lot of planes in the area. Almost all were extremely high, but we could see the blinking lights. They arrived after the incident and before we decided to return into the house. So, within 3 minutes. We went back into the house, and within the next 10 minutes, it sounded like an entire squad of large helicopters were flying in the area. Perhaps a coincidence. Our next sighting, UFO sighting in Saginaw, Michigan, occurring on November 24th, 2017. Came in from the northeast, passed over my head, made 2 separate 45-degree turns. Lost sight as it headed southeast. The witness continues, I woke up at 4:11 a.m. and I heard noises outside. I went out to find it was my neighbor working on the interior of his home. As I was heading back in, I looked up and noticed how clear and bright the sky was with no clouds. That's when I noticed a light approaching from the northeast. My first thoughts were that it was a shooting star, but it was too slow for that and too fast for any satellite or aircraft that I know of. It was too high and covered too many miles to be any kind of drone. As it passed over my head, it made roughly a 45-degree angle turn, then straight for a second, 2, and then another 45-degree angle turn, and straight again, heading southeast, never changing speed until I lost sight of it, which was behind the street light glare from across the street. As the object passed over, I could see that it appeared to be self-illuminated with a very dim blue-white glow, like a low-watt light bulb with black paint covering half, letting out only patches of light. There were no other lights on it. If it had been settling, still you would never have noticed it. Even in the city at 4 a.m., it was very quiet, and the object was completely silent. It was hard to tell how high it was, maybe 1,000 feet or more, or the shape of it. The duration of the sighting was very brief, no longer than 20 seconds. I believe it was under intelligent control because of the sharp turns. I remember waving and yelling for it to stop. I've had many planes and helicopters, including military aircraft, pass over my home, heading to and from BS Airport. This object was completely different. It was Black Friday morning, So I thought maybe it was a spotlight, but it never happened again. There was no beam. There was nothing for a spotlight to reflect off from. I've lived at this location for over 40 years, and this is not the only sighting I've had. This is the only one that I have reported. The subject of UFOs has always been of great interest to me, since a sighting as a young child, another in my early 30s, then mid-40s, and now this one. Because of my interest and open mind, I've had many people, friends and family, tell me of their experiences. One recently by a close friend living just outside of the Saginaw area. P.S. If any official member of MUFON would like more information, please feel free to contact me. Our next UFO sighting happened in Gainesville, Florida, on November 23rd, 2017. UFO hovering over treetop. The witness goes on to say, I was getting in the car with two of my friends to get lunch, and that's when we heard a helicopter. We thought it was the hospital's helicopter at first, but we spotted it, and we knew that it wasn't because it was all black. The hospital helicopters are orange and blue here. We were trying to spot another helicopter, and we saw a plane. It looked as if it was just a commercial flight, however. Then we noticed the UFO hovering right above the treetops, and we knew something was wrong. I took a photo, but one of my friends have a video. I told him about this sight, and he said he would upload the report as well with the video. Anywho, the UFO hovered for about 15 minutes and then very abruptly descended below the treetops and out of our sight. My friends thought it was cool, but I am scared to know that there are aliens out there, especially ones near me and my neighbors. Judging by the direction, it was probably hovering over the nearby elementary school, as weird as that sounds. In the picture that's been attached to this story, I have cropped and zoomed in so that you can see it better. Next, a blast from the UFO past. UFO sighting Black Triangle. Sighting occurred San Diego, California, October 28th, 1976. On board USS Racine en route to Hawaii in the Pacific, 2 days out from San Diego, while on watch on the stern of the ship, I observed a UFO. The witness goes on to say, while in the Navy, on board the USS Racine, 1st 1191, I observed a very strange object while on watch at night. We had left San Diego on our Westpac tour on October 26, 1976, according to the itinerary in my ship's cruise book. It was 2 days out from when we left, so I believe the date was October 28, 1976. Our ship had departed alone without the convoy, due to mechanical repairs. I was on the night watch on the rear of the ship, stationed to report any objects or contacts to the bridge over the headphone set. It was late at night, dark, and there were no lights or objects to report to the bridge. All I could see were the stars, the horizon over the dark sea, and the foam of the ship's wake. No reportable contacts. Then I heard over the headset other crew members talking about something. I looked around and saw a triangular object directly behind the ship. It was about a half-mile away and appeared to be hovering just above the water. It was glowing an yellowish, orangish color and appeared to be very large. Everyone was chattering on the headset, and I heard someone say, "It looks like a Christmas tree." The chattering continued until I heard someone say, "Shut up." I then reported a contact bearing 180 degrees, approximately 1/2 mile to the bridge. There was no reply. The object continued to maintain its position for about 3 to 4 minutes. Then I observed the object slowly getting smaller in size, as if it moved directly away from us at a high speed until it disappeared. There was very little talk on the headphones after that, and after a short while, another shipmate came to relieve me. It was a rotating 45-minute watch, so my next station was port after steering compartment. Then I was on the port lookout on the bridge, and then on the helm, the steering wheel. While on the helm, the door behind me opened, and I saw a radar technician I knew. I asked him about what I had seen, and he said there was nothing on the radar screen. My watch finally ended without much conversation with others about what we all saw. There had to have been at least 10 or more sailors and officers that saw what I saw. The next day, after saluting an officer I knew, I asked him what it was that we saw last night on watch. He then turned to me and said, "You didn't see anything, and that's the last I want to hear about it." There was never much talk about that incident after that, and the rest of the Westpac was fairly uneventful. After all of these years, I can still remember that what I saw was the most unexplainable thing I have ever witnessed. I think I have reported to this MUFON group several years ago, but it was a different format with less information. In my ship's cruise book, I think I can identify other crew members who may have been on watch that night. I have told my story to my family members and others. I know what I saw, and it was very strange. Now, dabs into some mystery science. A special treat on this date for those of you not familiar with one of Australia's most notorious UFO sightings. On the morning of April the 6th, 1966, the Australian city of Melbourne was visited by an unknown, or at least unfamiliar object or objects. The then outer suburb of Westall was apparently a sort of ground zero for the aerial oddities, where it made an approach to the ground or actually landed. Much has been made of the Westall UFO incident, and here is not the place to rerun the generally accepted narrative. Others, be they documentary makers, journalists, authors, or researchers, have produced many a treatment on the case already. At the core of the event, a large number of school children from the Westall High School claim to have personally witnessed the airborne episode, and their modern-day testimony has been given a considerable quantity of recent exposure. One aspect of the incident which has been insufficiently explored is that of the staff who worked at the school. Other than the science teacher, Andrew Greenwood, we have heard very little, either then or now, from the teachers who were there on the day and caught up in the unusual saga. Recently, the writer had the opportunity to exchange communications with a former English and mathematics teacher who was staffed at Westall High School. A now successful author, Hazel Moore, now Hazel Edwards, offers opinions which are quite different than the general version of high school ufological narrative found elsewhere. Simply put, most, but certainly not all, of what I have personally read about Westall has been reactionary or has been presented in tabloid magazines, rushed newspaper articles, short sound bites, and so forth. In conversing with Hazel, the writer states, not only got to hear from a teacher, but got to
This holiday season, make the smart choice and switch to Sprint and get a new Samsung Galaxy S8 or S8 Plus 50% off your lease. That's right, 50% off the GS8 or GS8 Plus, one of Samsung's hottest devices. Plus, with Galaxy Forever, you can upgrade to the latest Galaxy anytime after 12 lease payments. Visit your local Sprint store, sprint.com/holiday deals, or call 1-800-SPRINT1 today.
Requires 18-month lease and new line. Savings via monthly credit applied within 2 bills. Early termination results in remaining balance due, subject to credit and $30 activation fee. Restrictions apply.
formulate their own questions. In the interest of thoroughness, transparency, and studying what happened that fateful April day, the writer presents the content of the discussions with Hazel, and what they discovered was most unexpected. After reading a late August 2016 media story on the Westall UFO case, which mentioned Hazel, the writer contacted her via social media and Facebook. These initial contacts were on the 25th of August 2016. The writer goes on to state, I introduced myself as a UFO case researcher who wished to obtain yet unpublished testimony from persons directly involved in Westall. Following from that, there was no response, and I didn't pursue her further. On the 26th of October 2017, Hazel, who I have established was indeed an English and mathematics teacher at Westall High School, replied to my year-old message. Her first communication read, Dear Paul, I just found your query relating to UFOs in Westall. I've always maintained that there was no UFO landing at the school that day, where I was an English and maths teacher. 2 other former teachers agree with me. The most interesting development from the whole episode has been the community's desire to have a common, significant memory. It was a new migrant community, and the real story lies in the success which many of these former students have made of their lives. For just a few, the supposed UFO was the only thing of significance, but others have created many worthwhile skills and projects. These are the facts, really. The supposed site of the landing where the UFO playground is now situated is so far from the back of the original school that students could not have reached it within the break. There was a hyped-up atmosphere that day, of the kind that sometimes occurs with students during very windy weather. Mr. Sambleby, the principal, did tend to be authoritarian, but had to retain order in a new and raw school, and was strict on the day. One student rang the TV station mid-afternoon on a slow news day, and things kind of escalated from there. I've looked at the supposed witness accounts, and most are built on suppositions. For example, men in uniform appeared 45 minutes after, and the army base is 45 minutes away. Therefore, the army was involved. Not logical. Of course, with this, I was somewhat surprised by such a clear, lengthy piece of introductory testimony. With some ado, including the swapping of emails, a further appraisal of what I personally study within the UFO field, and a few early vetting inquiries, I drafted several exploratory questions for her to answer as she saw fit. The first question this writer posed was merely, what are your general recollections of that day's events? Hazel replied, During the class time that afternoon, the students were hyped up, but few actually reported real evidence of seeing anything. It was gossip built on hearsay. It was the girl student who called the TV news, which set a media frenzy in place. Mr. Sambleby, the principal, tried to quiet things down, but he wasn't trying to cover up anything. Just keep control in a fairly challenging school. Lots of inexperienced staff like me in our first year of teaching. The 20-year-old science teacher, Andrew, was interviewed by media and really liked the experience, so stories grew. Because he was the science teacher, more attention was paid. In later follow-ups of the story, I always stated the story was being exaggerated. But my comments were always edited because many felt that the UFO story gave them a connection to media fame. They wanted to be part of a story. 2 other teachers, Roger Adams and Vivian Clark, agreed with me. A journalist asked me, "What did you do after the momentous event?" I said I left at 4 p.m. to go to my Monash Uni lecture on politics on the Clayton campus as I was studying as well as working full-time. He asked why I didn't stay after school when such a momentous event had occurred. I replied that it didn't. The flattened grass was part of the area where teenage students messed around between school and the migrant camp. The journalist from the Dinnagang Journal agreed that he had reported what students and staff said, but he was cynical about the little green men, which was the level the story reached very quickly. I did attend a reunion of Westall High School decades later, to which I was invited, and several were being interviewed about the UFO on that afternoon. I thoroughly enjoyed my time teaching at Westall and put a lot of effort into my students. I was pleased to see how well some had done, but I was also intrigued by a few of those now adults who wanted the UFO story to be fact because it gave them kudos. My belief is that the real story is the success of a migrant community and their desire for a common history, and the reactions to the UFO story is part of that. I also attended the opening of the UFO playground, funded by Kingston Council, and an excellent playground, where one of my former students asked me to keep quiet about my UFO qualms because she stated, "It's my only chance to be famous, and you're not going to take that away from me." As a professional writer of fiction, I was asked by the documentary maker not to write about the subject, as he wished to do so himself. I think it's possible there was some type of flying object which went across the area, but it didn't land. The second question I posed was, when specifically did the alleged flying saucer incident come to your attention? Hazel's reply was, just after lunch. I had an English class who were fairly hyped up. Usually I had a good relationship with my students, but they couldn't settle. Several were talking about something seen from the oval. Only later was the flying saucer label used. In the afternoon break, the staff talked amongst themselves, but most comments were hearsay. Students had asked Andrew Greenwood, the science teacher, to have a look from the oval. I'm not sure if he actually saw anything, but he was the one interviewed on the evening TV news. Importantly, at least to me, my third question was, what discussions did you have with other staff members? This is Hazel's reply. Until we saw the TV news coverage, Roger Adams and Vivian Clark, 2 other English teachers who agreed with my view, dismissed the hype as something comparable to a windy day escalation of student wind-up. Since 1966, I've had several conversations with staff. Some support the view it was a UFO or maybe a military experimental flying object off course. A few claim to have seen suits in the school after hours. We didn't. Neither did we hear any American accents of supposed CIA, FBI undercover agents. The location is what I have the most qualms about. Where the current UFO playground is established is where it was supposed to have occurred. That is a long way back from the school, of the secondary school. Students could not have got there and back at lunchtime, as they were supposed to be within the school playgrounds. The fourth question I asked was, what discussions did you have with the students? In her reply, Hazel stated, within the school, students discussed their part in the afternoon, but as the media stories grew, there was a kind of repressed memory exercise where some began to remember things they hadn't mentioned earlier. One student did leave a month or so after this, and that fact was picked up by one correspondent who claimed she vanished. Not so. genuine transfer to another school, which happened a lot with the transitory migrant camp community as parents got better jobs elsewhere. We did attempt to discuss in class the need for evidence before you claim something. Following that, I wanted to make sure any contact with Principal Sambali was covered. So the fifth question I posed was, did you have any discussions with the principal about the events of that day? Hazel's reply was, Mr. Sambaldi attempted to dampen down discussion and wanted us to return to normal classes. Whenever the local media picked up on the story, there'd be a resurgence of interest within the school and the local Clayton Westall community. The enthusiasm of the documentary maker, Chanel, who was always polite in his exchanges, kept interest in the subject. He was not present at the supposed UFO incident, but his wife/girlfriend lived in the area. My sixth question, which aimed at potentially finding earlier interview accounts to study, was, what interviews have you done over the years with anyone about the incident? Hazel replied to the writer, yes, the Danagong Journal. I've had various researchers contact me across the years, but when I claim it probably wasn't a UFO, my comments tend to be cut. The documentary maker was the most persistent interviewer, but the eventual documentary was comment on comment rather than facts. With that, I queried which documentary maker, to which Hazel gave a web link and a brief reply. The web link she gave is listed, and her statement was simply, documaker Shane, ? Sorry, forgotten his surname. Very charming and polite man, Canberra based now. My seventh question was, what you think happened that day? Possibly there was some kind of flying object used and viewed by a few people. I seriously doubt it was a UFO. The most interesting story is why a school and broader community want to believe it, and the speed at which a story can escalate. Much of the ancillary comment on social media about what might happen was rarely substantiated by facts. It was on a slow news afternoon that a junior secondary student rang the TV newsroom, and then everybody wanted to be a part of it. The real story is the subsequent sense of community created by this fiction. I'm in favor of scientific research and posing hypotheses which then need to be proved, and of thinking outside conventional frameworks. But I need proof, evidence, not just opinion. And frankly, the Westall UFO sighting being listed as fact worries me. Makes me wonder about some other, quote, facts. Moving away from the incident itself, the eighth question was, have you any notes, diaries, or documentation from 1966 about the incident? Hazel replied, I gave it a passing mention in my memoir, Not Just a Piece of Cake is the name of the book. Being an author, frankly, I didn't take notes in 1966 because I didn't think it was that significant. I wrapped up the series of inquiries with a ninth question, do you care if I publish any of this one day? Hazel replied, you're welcome to publish. Happy for you to use my name. Can't find many photos from that era, but will email you the one I have. Thus, a reasonably quantity of information to deliberate over. I thought wise to clarify some of Hazel's answers to a more loosely arranged format, and came back to state to her, Hi Hazel, I've read through your answers, and these will be detailed enough for me to present in some sort of report. I have a few follow-up questions. One that springs to mind is this, the girl who rang the TV station, how would this be done from inside or outside a school? Surely she didn't have permission. Hazel said, no, I think she probably wagged it to ring outside early in the afternoon. Fascinating UFO story. Well, I want to thank you all for listening to UFO Headline News with me, Heidi Hollis. Be sure to check out UFOHeadlineNews.com daily, and also tune into my other weekly show, The Outlander, which is on Fridays, 9 p.m. Eastern, 8 p.m. Central, and catch my paranormal comic called The Outlanders, Direct links can be found by my website, HeidiHollis.com, or just come to InceptionRadioNetwork.com. Remember always to keep informed and inspired.